This is the oral reading recording of a grade 6 learner.
Weather. The weather, sunshine, fog, rain, clouds, wind, heat, cold is always changing in the most part of the world. These changes are caused by what happens in the atmosphere, the layer of air above the earth. The atmosphere is always moving, driven by the sun. Heat near the equator, the sun's strong rays heat the air. At the north and south poles, the sun rays are weaker and the air is colder. This uneven heating means the atmosphere is never still. Hug masses of warm and cold air flow round and round between the tropics and the polar regions as their wandering air masses meet, raise and fall and heat and cool they cause weather. When cold and warm masses meet, the air whirls in a giant spiral called the depression. The depression will bring clouds, wind, rain, and summer thunderstorms. They can also cause violent tornadoes and hurricanes. The meeting line between two air masses is called a front. When cold air pushes up behind warm in it forms a cold front. When a warm mass catch up with a cold mass, it creates a warm front. Fronts actually brings change in the weather. Weather. The weather, sunshine, fog, rain, clouds, wind, heat, cold is.
The reader mispronounced the word sunshine and said sunshine. She also said fog instead of fog. She mispronounced wind and said wind, and the word cold and said cold.
Always changing in the most part of the world.
The reader inserted the word the between the words in and most. She also omitted the plural forms in the word parts.
These changes are caused by.
The reader omitted the plural forms in the word changes and said change. She also mispronounced the word cost and said coast.
What happened in the atmosphere, the layer of air above the earth.
The reader omitted the s in the word happens and said happen. She also mispronounced the word atmosphere and said atmosphere. Also, she mispronounced the word earth and said
The atmosphere is always moving, driven by the sun heat.
The reader once again mispronounced the word atmosphere and said atmosphere. She also mispronounced the word driven and said driven. The reader also omitted the s in the word suns.
Near the equator, the sun is strong rays heat the air.
The reader once again omitted the s in the word suns.
At the north and south poles, the sun rays are weaker and the air is colder. This uneven heating means the atmosphere is never still.
The reader omitted the s in the word suns. On the next sentence, the reader mispronounced the word uneven and said hinibin. The reader once again mispronounced the word atmosphere and said atmosphere.
Hug masses of warm and cold air flow round and round between the tropics and the polar regions.
The reader mispronounced the word huge and said hug. She then substituted the word flow and said flow, and inserted s in the word round. She then mispronounced the word polar and said polar, then omitted the plural form s in the word regions.
As their wandering air masses meet, raise and fall and heat and cool they cause weather.
The reader substituted the word this to there. She also substituted the word rise to race and mispronounced the word fall to pall. She also inserted word and between fall and heat.
When cold and warm masses meet, the air whirls in a giant spiral called the depression.
The reader mispronounced the word whirls and said whirls.
Expression will bring clouds, wind, rain, and some thunderstorms.
The reader mispronounced the word depressions and said dispression. She also initially mispronounced the word bring and said bin, and then successfully corrects herself as she said bring. The reader mispronounced also the wind and said wine. The reader omitted the in the word summer and omitted the plural form s in the word thunderstorms.
They can also cause violent tornadoes and hurricanes.
The reader mispronounced the word cause and said cause. She then substituted the word violent and said violet. The reader initially mispronounced the word tornadoes and said torn. She then unsuccessfully corrects herself as she said tornadoes. Also, she mispronounced the word hurricanes and said hurricane.
The meeting line between two air masses is called a front.
The reader mispronounced the word front and said front.
When cold air pushes up behind warm in it prompts a cold front. When a warm mass catch up with a cold mass, it creates a warm front.
The reader mispronounced the word air and said ain. She also substituted the word forms and said proms. Also, she mispronounced the word front and said pront. The reader omitted the w in the word warm. She also omitted the word air and omitted the plural form s in the word catches. The reader substituted the word it and said in, and mispronounced the word front and said front.
Fronts actually brings change in the weather.
The reader mispronounced the word fronts and said bronze. She also mispronounced the word usually and said actually. Lastly, she inserted s between bring and changes. Then, she omitted the plural form s in the word changes.